Wow. Thank you so much for joining the We Don't Play podcast show today, Good News. How are you?
Doing well. It's a cool day here in Toronto, but I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. I'm sure people are like, how did this happen? It's the first time you're being on the show. My brother's on the show and doing big things, by the way. And I feel like this is one episode that a lot of people will listen in just to know exactly how the conversation goes between brother to brother. And definitely the things that people are going to listen to are important based on where they are in life, how they are doing. And what you're going to show for us today is simply going to help a lot of people identify themselves and understand how to overcome identity crisis, which I'm excited to share with you and hear your thoughts, because a lot of people have been going through these things, and I think for you to be good for us to just let you know and give you that inspiration so that you can be an inspiration to people. And I'm sure people want to know, how did you start? Like, where did this all begin from? Because they've read the title, now they're curious.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I guess it goes in different ways when I think about it as to how it started. So if you think about starting, like in terms of the actual artifact, the book itself, that is a whole story of its own, where it's something I never really wanted to do. I've never thought about writing a book before, never had it as one of my goals at the beginning of last year. It's something that came straight from God, and I kind of recognized the voice when it's almost like an order to do something that is good for others that I don't naturally want to do. I deliberated on it for a while, but it never left me. And the whole essence of how it began first started with like a little nudge, like, oh, let's write a book, and we're going to use details from your life and your experiences growing up a pastor's kid. And it didn't make any sense when that first came to light. And then over time, prayed on it, thought about it in March, and then I was like, you know what, God, I'm just going to yield and I'm going to start. So I started going on Google, like, how do you write a book? Like, what's the structure of a book? Or how do you, like, it's not only, I'll sit down and I'll start writing. Like, if I'm going to do something, I want to do it well. So I did a lot of research into what it takes to have a good book. And with that, like in different times, God was just revealing things to me. And I think that's how he kind of works with us, is the moment you say yes to his plan and you trust him in it, and you also put your own work in as well, he'll kind of work each time to kind of unveil things that you need at each level of the journey. So started officially writing in April, and just almost fell in love with my audience at a point. When I said it, it's like, when you're creating the book, it was like, what do I want my audience to get? Like, thinking about things from my audience lens and then scaling back was really important. So tackling the whole concept of identity from like 4 different pillars: psychological research that has been done, from an emotional standpoint, telling real stories from my life to build emotional connections with my audience. Third, from a religious and spiritual aspect, tying them both together. And the fourth one, from like a materialistic standpoint, where like tying all those pieces in while adding to this body of work called identity and the search for identity and what identity means in different contexts, and what is at the source, a lifetime of fulfillment and progression in that standpoint. That whole focus of thinking about how it could help youth, fellow pastors, kids like myself, people who might have been old and feel like it's, they've wasted their lives, it's almost too late, but wanted to kind of restore hope for them. And banking it on that, I think that was the story of the genesis of how the book came to be, and everything just followed through over the next 8 months to get it to exactly where it is, and now available on Amazon.
Wow, man, that's a great story. When you think about the path, especially how you said, looking at Google, learning how to do these things, they're like very easy to pick on, but you don't search for those things until it becomes a real thing to you. If you're trying to cook something, you want to know how to cook a certain kind of meal. until you get there, you won't search. So you seeing that, did it give you an enlightenment that, okay, this is easy? Or was it like, oh, there's much more I need to cover?
Books are hard, man. Like shout out, after writing a book, I'm like, shout out to anybody who's written a book before. Like, it's not easy, whether it's 20 pages, 30 pages, 40 pages, 50 pages, 60, like whatever it is, like, you know, it is a lot of work. Putting together your thoughts in a way that makes sense to you. And the thing about a book is, like, if the book isn't even blessing you as the author, as you're writing it, it's not going to bless your audience. So there's many nights when I would have writer's block and I just can't do anything. There's other times when I traveled to go specifically, like, I thought I could get the book done in a weekend. So I went on a solo trip to Dominican thinking, like, you know, give me 96 hours and I'll be able to get this book done. It wasn't like that at all. Like, it's not that. Some people can do that, but the process for me, it wasn't like that, because there's a lot of layers that, because it was something that came from God, I couldn't just demand God to give me everything at once. It was stuff that, as I kept writing, deeper revelation, deeper life experiences, things that made it into the book that were happening at the time I was writing. At the time I was writing, there was just conversations I was having with people naturally that were like, oh my gosh, as we had that conversation, I was like, this is something I have to put in the book because of the impact it just had on me, had on the other person, had on the people that I was discussing with. And I was like, this is something that will bless others. And it fit. Now let's just think about it. How would it fit? So there's aspects of this manuscript where I thought about how to structure it, and I said, okay, I'm going to maybe have 8 chapters. 8 chapters seemed like, you know, a healthy enough amount of building up to something and giving people what they need. But the more I looked at that, I was like, do I want to tackle this subject like so in depth for the first time? Or do I want to attack the foundation and then just lay just one level up to kind of start without going in too deep and maybe losing my audience? You know, wanted the book to be digestible, wanted to be something that they can come back to if they want to refer to it and say, I want to reread it. It's not going to take them too long to reread it, but it's still as impactful. So I would say just going online and searching what makes a good book, like, that's one part of the puzzle. When you know, actually start to write, and when I started to write and thinking about my audience, that's why I said fall in love with your audience, because sometimes you hate your work. Like, if you keep looking at your work, you're like, this could be better, this could be better, this could be better. And like, from a perfectionist standpoint, you might never get it out there because you just feel like it's not good enough. So continuously working on it over time, I just thought about what's the best thing my audience would resonate with and focused on those. And yeah, like, built a book in that way, kept updating the manuscript. And funny enough, like, towards the end, when I thought it was final, it turns out that at that moment, I actually had 11 versions more after I thought I had my final manuscript. And that was all in a span of 2 weeks. So, as I say, it's not as easy as you think. I think putting the final part of the book is actually harder than the 8-month or 9-month or 12-month or 1-year process that you might take to create it. The final stretch, because you're so close to the finish line, you will pick up on so many things that you maybe wrote 11 months ago that you're like, this needs to be tweaked. This needs to be tweaked. So that's why I say it's not an easy fix, but at the end of the day, it is fulfilling when you get the feedback back from people who've read the book and you're like, yeah, this is why I fell in love with my audience.
Oh, this is great. You know, I read the book on the way back and I finished it and I was like, wow, there's so much to unpack, because the different stories that you covered, and I want people to check it out for themselves, but majorly how you were able to tell the story and also reflect back on how you're experiencing it. Then you come back like a chapter later and then describe the same experience but in a different way. It now makes someone feel like, oh, okay, there's a connecting factor. So it's like, when I read it, it felt like a series, because you can't go to chapter 5 until you've gone through chapter 1. So the way you did it, was it in a very sequential way that made somebody feel like, okay, you can't skip a page because every page counts?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That was very intentional, and even the orders of the chapters are very intentional with them. I didn't joke around with that, because every thought built on another, and so I was, as I said at the beginning, I was laying foundations. So I was not going to start until like talking about some of the stuff in depth. I think chapter 3 is the longest chapter, I believe. That's refined and redefined. That is the longest chapter because I'd spent the first 2 chapters laying down some foundations. And chapter 3, I really wanted to get into some deep stuff. Yeah, and that required each reader to have at least open up their mind to some possibilities and ask themselves some questions beforehand. So when chapter 3 comes along, it kind of builds on some of the things that the principles from chapter 1 and chapter 2. And in chapter 3, it's now you kind of see how things start to connect and lead you into what chapter 4 and chapter 5 would look like. So that's why I cut it down from 8 chapters. I felt like I could, if I did a very good job of laying the foundations in the introduction, the chapter 1 and chapter 2, chapter 3, 4, and 5 would be able to deliver what I needed people to take out of it. And it's funny you mentioned this right now because I was speaking to somebody yesterday in my office, and they actually mentioned to me that when they first read the first chapter, they were like, oh, like something hit them that they hadn't, that's something that they might have believed all their life. The first chapter, I said something that contradicted what they believed. And they were like, whoa, what's happening? Like, the first scared me a little bit. And good to the person said, I'm going to keep reading. So they kept reading. And after they're like, oh, now I get it. To your point, oh, I get it. Now I get it. Now it makes sense why he started that way, why he kept talking about it that way, how it led to the other train of thought. And it's caused them to now ask questions, which is what I wanted. I wanted my audience to understand some things that I didn't, and that took me some time to understand. But now, with knowledge and understanding, now that births the wisdom. So it was looking to make sure people got those concepts and those foundations. And it's very important because there's now another person who got the book, and they said they now by themselves have come to me and confessed that they were biased when they first got the book. They were like, I now need to read it again in depth now, because they said the first time they got the book, they were just reading and they had a bias. But as they had that bias, over time, that's the way the book works. Yeah, I knew what I was doing intentionally. If you soak it and let it soak in, there's some things where you ask yourself questions and you don't need to have all the answers there. Come back. That's what the material needs to be digestible. So now the person said they're actually going to restart reading and then now go through it now because they realized that they had a bias that might be stopping them from seeing some things and seeing the light that is in the book. So they have a lot of questions now. They actually asked me that each week they want to ask me questions now. Because they're very curious and something is helping them to understand more. So that's why I say it's funny you mentioned that, because everything was very intentional from each page.
That is classic. And I love that you did that, because even the title, the subtext is about, from the lens of a 21st century pastor's kid. And, as pastor's kids, we go through a lot of experiences, a lot of identity crisis. And somebody may say, okay, I'm not a pastor's kid, but can I relate? How would you tell that person, and how would you express that to them if they're asking that question?
Yeah, so it's beautiful, beautiful question. And that was one of the first things that I got off the bat at the beginning. I said, this is not going to be a book only for pastors' kids. They are a primary target audience. But what is in the book, and that's why I said it tackles this whole concept of identity by exploring psychological positions that have been put forward, their limitations, from an emotional standpoint, the connections to a real story. Like, you might not resonate with some of the experiences that I've had as a pastor's kid, but what you will resonate with is some of the similar questions. We all ask ourselves the similar questions as to, what are my goals for life? What does success mean to me? We all have faced some form of external pressures, either from society telling us that we have to achieve a certain level before we're deemed successful, or from family members who are reliant on us to be successful so that they can be as well positioned. We all ask ourselves at times, they say, am I in the right job? Am I in the right place? Am I with the right people? We all ask ourselves these questions. And at the foundation, you can go through life all sometimes guessing, and probably arrive somewhere, but would it be where you ought to be? You might not be too sure, but you're like, okay, this is it's better than where I used to be, hopefully. So why I say that is for folks who are like, oh, I'm not really a pastor's kid, I don't know how to relate. That's the bias. The title is specific for a reason, because I do provide my lens from an emotional standpoint there, but from a practicality standpoint, it's something where you read it, and if you really take time to really understand it, not just soak it up and just read it like it's a comic, there's so many layers that intentionally I went after, and I was vulnerable to some of the things in my life as well to make sure that people knew I was not just talking about something that I haven't experienced. That's why I like research books, but sometimes if the researcher themselves hasn't really experienced what they're researching, it's like, okay, you can just position to me what you've observed. It's a completely different thing when somebody's telling you not only what they've observed, but also what they've lived and lessons. And I think that's the beauty of it, is that people can connect emotionally with some of the questions and the principles and the overarching theme of the book. They'll be able to get something out of it. And I've heard from different people about different things from the book so far. People who for the first time were asking themselves, what does success mean to them? For the first time, they were actually asking themselves that question. Other people who connected with some of my vulnerable stories. Other people who were suicidal before they got the book and now feel hope, feel loved, and want to be better. People who have families, have kids, thinking about how they can do better for their kids, So there's all these different layers of people whereby, male or female, old or young, you can connect.
Wow. You said something that really caught my attention when someone told you that they overcame suicidal thoughts. That's a big thing because there's mental health awareness, especially in North America. And some people don't know how to deal with that. They go through therapy, they go through withdrawals, they go through all kinds of things. When that person told you that, and any other person that has told you how they've experienced the book, do you feel a difference in how they speak? Because identity is from within. So is there a difference in their tone as opposed to before and after?
Well, some of these things still take time. I would say some of the things are not easy, oh yeah, wow, today I'm great. So some of the stuff take time. So these individuals, the beauty is that there's hope. They feel hope. And that's very important. So hope will turn into tone change, but there's still a lot of work. So that's why chapter 3 is very important. Chapter 3 is really around refined and redefined. So if somebody catches light in number 2, that's where the book is very intentional. If somebody catches light in chapter 2, I equate that light to people who might have been suicidal that are now saying, no, I have hope, I have hope. They've caught light. But within that light, it's a way you have to embody that light where it becomes your presence, and that can only be through staying. And through staying, shedding off. think about any fire. If you think about a fire today, if there's a fire that has just started across the street, this is just let's say it's a camp bonfire. You see that fire there. Oh, people from afar say, "Oh wow, we can see a light there. There's some heat that's coming out of that place." The person is not yet hot yet. You know what I mean? They're not yet warm. They just know that there's a source of light or there's a source of warmth nearby. They might have been outside and are feeling cold. So when I think about cold, I equate this to people who are suicidal. So they're cold. They're on the outside. They've now seen a light. Light is now on that fire. That fire provides warmth. That light also provides warmth. Now, as they now start to go closer, they start to get warmer, and a point whereby they are now at a within the vicinity. The way they stay, by the time they're done staying in that environment, that cold that they walked in with has left them. It's now been embodied and replaced with warmth through the heat that the fire was exuding. Now, what you also realize is that people who have stayed around fire for a while, they carry a certain fragrance. You can tell that this person has been somewhere for a while. So why I say that is some of these things, when it comes to mental health and people who are going through a lot of these challenges, sometimes miracles happen where somebody can be suicidal today and then they never feel they have a suicidal thoughts ever again. It's possible. But more often than not, it takes time. That's why therapists are still very important. Therapists are not the solution, but they are individuals that can help. So, for example, some of the people that are suicidal, like this one person specifically, I have somebody, I'm interacting with them differently, but I have somebody who's working closely with them. And setting some foundations, not from a spiritual standpoint, but also understanding the individual as a whole. Really trying to help them uncover who they are first, because if they've been lied to their whole lives in terms of their identity, in terms of what they're able to achieve, where their source and power comes from, it's not going to be a quick flip of the coin and they find something. They're going to have to learn, will yield themselves to be taught, and ask questions, and then now form a solid foundation for what's to come after. So that's why I kind of say I can see excitement, but excitement is good. But I know that excitement just waits, then on and off. There's light, then you might just forget that there's light. So you have to stay, and that's what I'm trying to encourage these individuals, is just plug in, stay there, keep asking questions. But I don't doubt that at the end of it, they'll come out of it fully transformed.
Amen. I definitely see that too. And I feel like people listening to this are also tapping in, wanting to know how they can also improve themselves. Speaking of improvement, I want to talk a little bit about the book, the cover, the evolution of the cover. When you're creating a book, you have pages, but when it's time for a cover, it's a whole different ballgame. Because I think about it like music-wise with covers and content. How did you come up with the concept, and where is it going so that people can also flow? When they see that book, they're like, yes, this is exactly what I'm looking for. Color, style, theme.
Oh, that's a good question. It took me a while, actually. I kind of had a picture of what I wanted, but I was trying to find people to work on it, from artists to work on it. But for some reason, they weren't able to, different circumstances, weren't really able to work on it for timing and everything. And I already kind of had a visualization of what I wanted people to feel, what I wanted to feel looking at it. I wanted to see myself in a cover in a state of confusion, but in a state of confusion, a state of despair, but with a form of hope on the page. So I just knew that was conceptually what I was thinking. I was like, I need to see that when I look at the cover. It's not as simplistic as I would have typically liked. It takes some time to get something simple. Even something simple can take time. But like this one, I needed to embody some emotional aspect to it. A cover that, it was emotional. So you see the title, Overcoming Identity Crisis. And this is why I kind of helped having you around, because when I kind of put together the artwork and I said, okay, how do I this cover, from a style standpoint, color standpoint, what's going to resonate, what's warm, but also contrast-wise, what stands out, what can be read from afar. That's why people like yourselves, God gave people like you the skill sets and the abilities to help with branding of things. So kind of reaching out to you, that I really appreciate your advice there, because I think I had green as one of the colors initially, I think. And I feel right now, I don't think green would have done justice. I'm very happy with the black and gold feel. So that whole process, when I kind of look at the cover, it's almost now when they kind of see it and is see a form of embodiment of me, but not really only me, but anybody who's stuck in this whole battle for identity and overcoming identity crisis. You see them in a state of despair, and then a light has come, and that light is very symbolic because that is the light of Christ. That is the light. Like the Bible, in so many different instances, describes the word that comes from God as light. It says that the word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. That is Psalms 119, verse 105. And then you get other verses that say, I think it's Psalms 119, verse 130. I might be studying wrong, but I think it's that one where it says that the entrance of your word gives light, brings light. It gives understanding to the simple, brings understanding to the simple. It's the embodiment. When I just looked at that, I just said, this is it. Like, that is it. The entrance of your word gives light. It brings understanding to the simple. The Bible is so poetic, beautiful, beautifully coined, but there's so many layers to that one verse. What does it mean? What is the light? What's the light? And what do I need to understand? What was so simple that I didn't understand before, that is now that the entrance of this word has given me that understanding. So it was, that cover kind of embodied everything I was going to go through the book. From the beginning, when people look at it, they'll just say, oh wow, overcoming identity crisis, wow. Oh, through the lens of a 21st century pastor's kids, wow. The picture, oh wow, is that you? I'm like, no, that's us. that's basically us.
That's a great concept, because it's like you put the person in front and center. You know, someone can see that and decide, okay, is that going to be me in a few years, or is that going to be me overcoming that in a few years? Because it's like an if-then statement that allows someone to think about the next path. Now, when you mentioned this, I was now going to ask this: what came first, the book or the cover?
In between, parallel.
Okay.
Parallel. I didn't, the manuscript was not done by the time I put the cover together. The manuscript was starting to get done, but I already had all the foundations. Once I had formed the foundations and I maybe written like maybe half or like 60%, I already knew what the cover was going to look like. I already knew what I wanted the cover to feel like. I didn't know what it was going to look like, but I already knew. And like, from based on what's in this book at Parallel, like, I know what this cover needs to feel like. So I think I got the cover done in October. The cover was done in October. The manuscript was done end of November. So it was done in parallel, but the manuscript, I started the manuscript in end of March. So that's why I say it was kind of done in parallel. I kind of had the idea, but then I was just landing on it, and I landed it, and I said, yeah, I'm not changing this.
This is so good. You know, I'm glad that we talked about this, and I know a lot of people, like you said, it's not only for pastors' kids, it's for people out there, you know, schools, businesses, you know, just being out in that place, because when, like you said earlier, people just go through life. I think it's more of an existence than a living scenario. So when they exist and they realize they're 40, 50 and they've not done most of the things that they could do, that book also brings them back into understanding where they are and whose they are. So it gives them light, and they can be able to now walk the path in a different way as opposed to how they were thinking before. Now, I'm even thinking with people who may not like to read but want to read. How will you encourage them to read? Because some people just don't have time, but people want to make time for those things as well.
So it's an adjustment, but we're also working on something long-term for individuals that fit that bucket. An audiobook is something that we do have in a roadmap of something that we want to do. It's just not something that we're focusing on right now, but definitely, hopefully by the end of this year or by middle of this year, we should have an audiobook for people who are similar to me in a sense, where I like, if you maybe walk to places a lot, or like to go on walks and things like that, like rather than listening to music, you sometimes just want to listen to a book or listen to an audiobook, and maybe listen to it on 1.5 speed. So you can kind of get through some things quicker. But like then now you at least get a high level understanding of it. But then maybe after, drill down, when you now have time to kind of sit down and meditate on some of the principles. And I think that's important, because there's somebody that I gave the book beginning of January. I think she's still reading it. Like, I think I remember I saw her and she had like notes all over the book, like highlighted stuff, like all that stuff, like all over the book. And it was good to see how, that's why I said, like, it's like her own copy, so she can do whatever she wants with that copy. It's similar to folks who who might I don't like to read. It's not a long read, but in terms of when I talked about level of understanding, it might take some time. Like, you can read the book, get the knowledge, but there's some things you might need to meditate upon, and maybe just ask yourself some deep questions that you've never asked yourself before, and be okay asking those questions. And that's why we're here, and that's why that book exists. It exists to kind of ask some of those, cause you to ask some of those questions. You don't have to have the answer at the time you finish the book, but I would encourage everybody who reads it, I think it's chapter 1 or chapter 2 that asks, that's chapter 2, what does a successful life mean to me? After you read the book, meditate on a few things. Answer that the first time, come back 6 months, 12 months later, answer it again. Has anything changed? What changed? Ask yourself, what changed? Why did that change? What do I feel different about things? So that's why I'm saying it's not, I can just read this quickly. You can, but the in-depth will take some level of understanding and commitment to actually ask yourself some tough questions, which at the end of the day, the book is for your benefit. I just get a thrill out of the privilege of knowing that God has used me in this way. And if there's people out there who are now able to walk better in alignment with his ultimate plan for their life, and understand that overcoming identity crisis isn't a moment, it's a lifetime thing. People sometimes feel like, I now know who I am. Yeah, you might know who you are, but circumstances can cause you to question. Things can happen that might cause you to question. So I wanted to make sure that individuals knew that. That's why chapter 5 ends the way it does, to cause people to realize that just because you think you figured it out in chapter 3 and chapter 4 doesn't mean it's always going to feel like that. So you have to keep on it, and that's where trusting God really helps to carry you along the way.
That's so good, bro. Thank you so much for bringing this light to us. As you were speaking, I was even counting the syllables of the overcoming identity crisis, and it hit me. It's literally a squad, a football squad. It's 4-4-2, and I think
I've never thought that. Okay.
It came to mind just now, and I was like, this is definitely, because you identify with a club, a team, a person, based on the characteristics and the likable, factors. And this is exactly what the embodiment of the book is about, allowing people to feel like, okay, now we can identify ourselves, because we were misidentified, or maybe we didn't know how to identify ourselves when we were younger. Just maybe because of background, history, politics, society, a lot of things can come into play. If there's one thing you can tell the audience that's listening, especially before they start reading the book, what kind of preconditioned, if I can use that word, mindset should they be in so that they can receive all the information that they're about to get?
So being in a mind space where you're kind of open. You don't have to be going through a lot to benefit from the book, but you just be in a mind space when you're kind of open to receive. And the overarching thing about the book is, and you'll see why I'm going to say this statement, you'll see why as you read the book, that overcoming identity crisis isn't really about you. It's really more about the lives that are connected to you. So when an individual does not know who they are, there's a tendency for them to not know that the gift that they have and the purpose that they have to better serve others. So they will go their whole life not knowing that they had this thing that was given to them, what they were born to do, that they just never did. And anything that they do that was contrary to that, they'll never find. You can study it and you can assess people's lives and say, you're like, okay, this person is definitely walking close to alignment because it's so natural to them, and the fruits of it are good. That you're like, okay, I might not be the one who created them, but I'm pretty sure that done a good job at this. So why I say that is, think about others. As you're reading the book, just don't think about it as selfishly grabbing as to, okay, this is how I can be better, how can I be better, how can I be better. It's this is how I can be better to serve others. So you basically want to come in and say, have an open mind, build a clear mind space where you can say, let me take this on and think about it and say, what am I about to learn? What am I learning that better equips me to be a blessing to those around me? I think from that mind space, it becomes a lot easier to conceive some of the things that are in the book. If it's just focused around what I want, me. It might be a little bit harder. You'll still get that because the book is there to help anybody who's already on that wavelength. It's fine. It will help. And for those who already happen to be, who maybe feel like they've already overcome identity crisis, it's okay. You can pick up. There's things that you can learn in the book. Pick it up. You might realize there's different angles to some things that you might not have thought about before that God placed in my heart to position. And it might not be for you. It might be for somebody that's very close to you that might be going through those situations. And that's why I say it's just having and being open and start saying, like, I already have it all figured out. Like, if I tell you I have it all figured out, as the author, I don't have it all figured out. God is the one who has it all figured out. I know some parts, and that's why I trust Him for the rest. So that is why I encourage folks who even think that they will overcome identity crisis, they know exactly who they are. You can know exactly who you are, but it's always important to go to the mechanic and get some refining. And that is what the book can also help with. It can help, just make sure, okay, am I good? Okay. I'm good, then fine, I'll just go back. But if there's maybe like one part that needs to be fixed, the car isn't broken, the car is well put together, but it needs a little tune-up, the book can help with that tune-up as well.
Yeah, I like that. The book is a tune-up, because we overcome, but at the same time, when we go back into the drawing board, like you said, it's not an overnight success. People feel like that book is like a manual, like, oh, I forgot chapter 2, let me go back and read it. So it's more like a lifestyle that, as opposed to like, let me get to the finish line,
Correct.
Oh, this is good. Wow. Thank you so much, bro, for joining the We Don't Play podcast show today. I feel like this was definitely meant to happen. I didn't know when, how, but this is definitely a great episode. This is definitely Hall of Fame. For sure. For sure.
Thank you for having me. It's fascinating.
No, it's definitely great to have you here for sure. I know people want to grab this book. They're like, okay, now we hear it, we want to take action. How can people connect with you, and also how can they find the book?
Okay, so you can connect with me on Instagram at _Goody _. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn at Goodnews Obasi-ike. So that's good news, like good news, and OBASI-IKE. So that's how you can connect with me on LinkedIn. And then find the book. You can find the book on Amazon as of March 2nd. If you go on Amazon and search the title of the book, Overcoming Identity Crisis, through the lens of a 21st century pastor's kid, you should be able to find the book, or you can maybe search my name, Goodnews Obasi-ike, and that will probably bring it up. And Amazon, we work with Amazon to make sure we get something to you as soon as possible.
Amazing. Wow. Thank you so much for joining us again today. It's been a blessing to have you on the show, and I look forward to people getting to tell you stories and testimonies of how their lives have been changed through the book and through the lens of their own lifestyles, to glorify God in the end as well.
Yeah, thank you, amen. That's powerful. So we're looking forward to it, and can't wait to see what else happens.
Hey, for sure. Till we see you again, bro. Take care. God bless.
Amen.